Hi, this is Red Chair Reading. I'm Hobie Wan. We are reading Hardy Boys number 37, The Ghost at Skeleton Rock by Franklin W. Dixon. Chapter 13, Glasses. Check. Pursuit at El Morro. When the Hardys and Chet reached Columbus Plaza in a taxi, they saw Tony standing in the doorway of a small souvenir shop. It was on the corner of the narrow street to which Joe had traced the mystery man. "Okay, right here, driver," said Frank. The passengers got out and Tony came over to join them. "Now tell us everything, Tony," Joe requested when the group walked off a distance, out of anyone else's hearing. "Well, first of all, I want to tell you I've hired a swell observation post for us." "Cost $1," Tony explained. "It's a room in a house right across the street from the hideout. We'll have a clear view of both the pink stucco place and the alley." "Good work," said Joe. The boys hurried down the narrow cobblestone street, then ducked into the side entrance of the house where Tony had rented a room. They posted themselves at the front windows of the room. Lattice shutters enabled them to peer out without being seen. Almost an hour went by without results. "You sure you weren't seeing things?" complained Chet, who was getting warm. "Positive," said Tony. "Give the man in there a chance. If he went in, he's bound to come out sometime. Unless we've already missed him," Chet retorted. The words were hardly out of his mouth when Tony exclaimed in a low voice, "There he is!" A tall man with an unusually large head emerged from the alley. He was swarthy and had an aquiline-shaped nose. "Abdul!" Frank exclaimed excitedly. "He's the fellow who was shadowing us, Joe." His brother nodded. "We couldn't place him then with that hat over his face, plus not wearing his fancy oriental get-up." The assistant to Hugo, the fortune-teller, hatless now, wore dungarees and a striped jersey. "There is a hookup between those Hugo dummy smugglers and the freight thieves," said Frank. "Let's follow him," Joe urged. The four started out at once, keeping a safe distance behind the man. Abdul headed away from Columbus Plaza at Calle San Justo. He turned right and walked for several blocks, then walked to the left on the Boulevard del Valle. Eventually, he came to a broad iron gate standing open to visitors. It was the entrance to Fort Brooke, the big United States military post at the western tip of Old San Juan. With a casual salute to the soldier on guard, Abdul strolled on through. "Gallopin' gooseberries!" Chet burst out. "What's he up to now? Is he going to steal some military secrets?" "Only one way to find out," Frank replied, hurrying toward the fort. As the boys passed through the gate, a grassy green plateau stretched ahead them. It swept out toward the ocean and was used as a golf course. Men and women were playing golf. Tourist cars stood parked along the road, which curved to the left of the course. Facing this was a row of army buildings and officers' homes. "Let's separate and act like sightseers," Frank advised his companions. Each of them started wandering around alone, but kept a wary eye on Abdul. The man headed straight for the old Spanish battlements of El Morro. This ancient fort stood poised on a bluff jutting over the sea, beyond the end of the golf course. When Abdul reached the massive stone walls of the fortress, he glanced around for a moment. Seemingly satisfied that no one was following him, he ducked hastily into a round stone sentry house at the very tip of the rock-walled point. Below it, the surf pounded itself into foam over the coral rocks. Now why did he do that? Chet asked himself, puzzled. The boys began closing in. Frank reached the spot first and made his way along the wall to the steep parapet, where an ancient bronze cannon offered a convenient hiding place. Frank crouched down behind it to watch Abdul. Inside the sentry box, the man took a mirror from his pocket and aimed it to catch the sun. Excuse me. Then he began shooting flashes of light out to sea. Frank had a clear view. "He's signaling in international code," the boy realized with a gasp of excitement. Slowly the message was spelled out. 3:48:9 p.m. Skeleton. Frank wondered what it meant and who was receiving the message. He stood up and glanced across the water. Half a mile out he could see a blue speedboat. Just then Abdul turned to leave the sentry house. With a start he noticed Frank standing behind the cannon. At the same moment, the other three boys burst from their hiding places. Muttering a threat, Abdul took off like a bolt of lightning, heading for the road. Joe tried to nail him with a flying tackle, but the huge man swept the boy aside with a single blow of his great arm. "Stop him!" yelled Frank to a soldier and several sightseers. "He's wanted by the police." Most of the tourists were bewildered by the sudden commotion, but some of the onlookers grabbed for the fugitive too late. Startled golfers watched the chase wonderingly. By this time, Abdul was streaking across the links with the boys in hot pursuit. Despite his weight, the man covered the ground with amazing speed. Even Joe and Frank, who were track stars at Bayport High, could not catch up to him. Abdul gained the road just as a delivery truck passed. He leaped on the tailboard, and in a matter of seconds, the vehicle rumbled through the gate. "He's getting away!" Joe shouted, clenching his fists in bitter disappointment. At that moment, one of the golfers rushed forward. "Jump in my car," he cried, sprinting toward a white convertible. Panting their thanks, Frank and Joe piled in with him, and the car shot forward. The boys poured out their story in bits and snatches. "That fellow's wanted by the police," Frank explained. "He's part of a smuggling ring." "I hope we can catch him," the driver said. Fortunately, due to the town's narrow streets, traffic had to move slowly. Swinging down Calle Cristo, they soon caught sight of the delivery truck. It had turned left into Calle Sol, only to find the way blocked by a pushcart peddler. "This'll do," Joe said to their driver. "A million thanks." The boys leaped from the car and ran toward the truck, Joe in the lead. To his dismay, Abdul was no longer aboard. "Pardon me," Joe said to the man at the wheel. "Where's the big fellow who hitched a ride with you?" The driver leaned out of his cab and pointed down the street. "He jumped off the truck and went into that restaurant, senor. Caramba! What kind of a game is going on here?" Without waiting to explain, the boys dashed off. A moment later, they pulled up to a sliding halt as Joe caught sight of the restaurant's name. "Look," he gasped. "El Calypso Caliente. Hot Calypso. It's the password used at the airport back in Eastern City." "Hold it a second," Frank cautioned as his brother started inside. "Tony, you and Chet wait outside in case Abdul tries another fast one. If you see him come out, grab him." "Right." Frank and Joe entered the restaurant and glanced around swiftly. Abdul was not in sight, so they headed toward the rear of the place. The white-jacketed proprietor bustled forward to bar the way. He was a rather sinister-looking man with a heavy beard. "You wish something to eat, senores?" "We're looking for a man who's wanted by the police," Frank told him. "He came in here a few minutes ago." "What did he look like?" "A big fellow in a striped jersey." The proprietor bared his teeth in a wide smile. "You are wrong, senores. No one of that description has entered the restaurant. Suppose we look in the kitchen, just in case," Frank suggested. The owner hesitated, then raised his voice slightly and in Spanish. "Visitors coming to the kitchen." To the boys he added, "Muy bien, senores. You may go in if you wish." He gestured toward the swinging doors that led to the kitchen. "Thanks," Frank said crisply, and strode forward ahead of Joe. But as Frank pushed the doors open, his face suddenly blanched. It blanched in alarm. That is the end of chapter 13. This is the part where I'm supposed to say, click the button over there for the next chapter, and click this one here to subscribe, if you like. Okay.